As President Ibrahim Traoré read through the national security clause for the third time, a chill ran through his spine and his hands began to tremble. This agreement, which the world was celebrating, masked something dangerous beneath its polished language. The pressure inside the Grand Conference Hall of Ouagadougou's newly renovated International Summit Center was mounting. Flashes from global media cameras lit up the room as reporters prepared to witness what had been dubbed the investment deal of the decade. Traoré, dressed in an elegant African prince-style suit instead of his military uniform, sat tall but inwardly unsettled. Across from him sat Wei Zhang, the composed CEO of China's Prosperity Mining Consortium, flanked by a battalion of corporate lawyers and executives with steely expressions and silk ties. Economy Minister Cabaret had just declared to the press that the $4.8 billion Chinese investment would revolutionize Burkina Faso's economy, bringing infrastructure, technology transfer, thousands of local jobs, and a 60-40 profit-sharing arrangement that favored Burkina Faso. The room buzzed with optimism. After decades of exploitation by Western powers, it seemed the nation had finally found a more respectful partner. But behind the applause and promises, something felt off. Traoré's instincts had been on high alert ever since a private dinner weeks ago at the presidential palace, where Wei had praised the nation's lithium reserves as capable of lasting for generations. It wasn't the compliment itself, but the way he had said it, with a calculated pause and a subtle intensity that unsettled Traoré. That night, his translator Issa Konate, educated in Beijing and one of the few in Burkina Faso fluent in Mandarin, had approached him nervously and explained, "Sir, the term Mr. Wei used doesn't just mean long-term, it implies forever, as in total and perpetual control." Since then, Traoré had doubled down, keeping Konate close in every meeting, ordering silent monitoring of the Chinese delegation's internal language, and instructing legal teams to dissect every clause of the ever-changing agreement. With each revision, it seemed previous red flags were smoothed over, only for new, more subtly worded risks to appear. And now, as ceremonial speeches echoed off the marble walls and the world looked on in anticipation, Traoré found himself staring once more at Section 17, National Security and Resource Protection. What at first seemed like standard language about Chinese personnel protecting their mining investment now revealed something darker. A hidden clause buried in legal jargon, hinting at indefinite foreign security presence, unrestricted access, and sovereignty loopholes that could haunt the nation for generations to come. As Wei Zhang delivered a passionate speech about friendship and mutual prosperity between China and Africa, President Traoré quietly flipped to Appendix F of the contract, and what he found made his blood run cold. Hidden deep within the legal jargon was a provision that granted Chinese security forces extraterritorial jurisdiction, not only at the mining sites, but within a staggering 50-kilometer radius around each one. Even more alarming, these forces would be authorized to neutralize threats without seeking approval from Burkina Faso's government. With the proposed mining sites dangerously close to military bases and major urban centers, it effectively carved out pockets of Chinese-controlled security zones across the heart of the country. Traoré's hands trembled as he read further. There were also vaguely worded emergency conditions that would trigger automatic renewal of the contract, allowing indefinite Chinese control without parliamentary review. He couldn't help but think of former President Dimba, who had signed similarly opaque foreign deals and was later overthrown when the public discovered the hidden costs. Traoré himself had risen to power by promising to reclaim sovereignty over Burkina Faso's resources. Was he now about to betray that very promise under the pressure of economic desperation? Just then, his phone buzzed discreetly. It was a secure message from Colonel Ouedraogo, the head of military intelligence. Urgent. Chinese military attaché already discussing permanent base locations with Defense Minister Zongo. Intercepts confirm over 5,000 security personnel planned. Traoré's worst fears were confirmed. This was no investment. It was a Trojan horse for foreign military entrenchment, barely a few years after the country had managed to reduce French military dominance. "Mr. President," Cabaret's voice pulled him back. "They're waiting for your remarks before the signing." Traoré looked up. The room was silent. Cameras rolled. The Chinese delegation waited, smiling politely. But Konate, standing at his side, gave the faintest shake of his head. Traoré rose slowly, smiling at the crowd, his voice calm but firm. "This is indeed a historic day. For too long, Africa's wealth has enriched others while our people have remained poor. Today, we were promised a new chapter, a new model of partnership." Wei Zhang nodded, but his smile faltered as Traoré continued, "Real partnerships are built on transparency and mutual respect. I find it curious. that the Mandarin version of this agreement includes certain elaborations missing from the French text. The room froze. Cameras zoomed in. Perhaps Mr. Wei, Traoré said coolly, holding up the document, can explain why Appendix F grants foreign troops operational control over sovereign Burkinabe soil, or why the contract includes provisions for indefinite renewal without our consent. Whispers erupted across the Chinese side. Wei's translator whispered urgently into his ear, but his expression had already hardened. There must be some misunderstanding, Wei said, regaining his composure. Minor translation errors, technical matters we can resolve after the signing. Traoré raised an eyebrow. Minor technical issues? I would not call the deployment of foreign troops on our land a minor issue, Mr. Wei. For a moment, the mask dropped, Wei's charm faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. President Traoré, he said, voice tight with veiled threat, with all due respect, your country needs this investment. Your lithium reserves are worthless without the capital and technology to develop them, Wei said coolly, the mask of diplomacy slipping further. Perhaps you're overthinking certain standard protective clauses. But Traoré remained composed, though he couldn't ignore how quickly the tone had shifted, how fast the illusion of equal partnership had vanished. Standard clauses, he replied, that are conveniently buried in appendices, and conveniently differ between the Mandarin and French versions. Wei leaned forward, dropping all pretenses. Let me be direct, Mr. President. My company has invested heavily in preparing this project. The Chinese government has already approved economic aid packages based on this deal. Walking away now would be unwise for Burkina Faso's future. The threat was clear. Around the room, ministers shifted uneasily. Minister Cabaret wiped sweat from his brow. Finance Minister Urego stared at the table, avoiding Traoré's eyes. But Traoré's voice didn't waver. No, Mr. Wei. What I'm reading isn't a mistranslation. It's a deliberate strategy to take control not only of our lithium, but of our sovereignty. He closed the contract with quiet finality and placed it on the table.